Have you ever felt like you're living in a room without windows? I'm not talking about 4 literal walls, but that kind of invisibility that penetrates so deep, you start to doubt if you even exist anymore. You keep doing everything right, praying, serving, waking up early, carrying responsibilities no one sees, but it feels like no one notices. Not the people around you, not God. And the worst part isn't the exhaustion. The worst part is the silence. That deafening silence that makes you wonder if you still matter, if you still have purpose, if anyone, anywhere, sees what you're going through. Invisibility hurts in a different way. It doesn't scream. It whispers every single day that maybe you've been forgotten. What if I told you that this place, this shadow where you feel abandoned, might be exactly where God is working most intensely in your life? I'm not talking about cheap comfort or magical promises. I'm talking about a biblical pattern that spans millennia and might be repeating itself in you right now, in this very moment. There's a woman in the Bible who lived 84 years practically invisible. Her name was Anna, not the mother of Samuel, the one everyone knows. This is another Anna, a widow prophetess who appears for just a few brief verses in the Gospel of Luke. She lost her husband after only 7 years of marriage. And then she spent decades, entire decades in the temple, fasting, praying, waiting. No one saw her. No one mentioned her name. She had no platform, no recognition, nothing but a quiet conviction that God was still in control. 84 years. Think about that. Most of her life passed in absolute anonymity until the day Joseph and Mary brought the baby Jesus to the temple. And it was her, the invisible one, the forgotten one, the one no one consulted, who recognized the Messiah. She was prepared in secret for a public moment of revelation, but the preparation lasted almost 9 decades. We live in a culture that glorifies instant visibility. Social media, metrics, likes, views. The implicit message is clear. If you're not being seen, you don't matter. If no one's recognizing your effort, maybe you're doing something wrong. But God's kingdom operates by completely different logic. In the divine economy, the most transformative moments happen away from the spotlight. Invisibility isn't punishment. Often it's preparation, and the difference between the two lies in what you choose to do when no one's watching. When you feel invisible, the first thing that happens isn't in the world around you, it's inside you. There's a physical sensation, a tightness in your chest, shorter breaths, that weight that descends when you realize no one asked how you are. You look at your phone expecting a message that doesn't come. You finish an important project and no one comments. You serve, care, invest time and energy, but everything seems to disappear into a vacuum. And then comes the thought, does anyone care? Does God care? This pain is real, and validating it isn't weakness, it's honesty. Because God doesn't minimize your pain. He doesn't say get over it or stop complaining. He sees. He always saw. But what he's doing behind the scenes might be completely different from what you imagine. There's a difficult tension to sustain, trusting that God is working when you see no results at all. But that's exactly the faith the Bible describes. Not a conviction based on visible evidence, but a certainty anchored in who God is, even when everything around seems to contradict it. And what's interesting is that many of the most powerful biblical figures went through long periods of invisibility before any kind of public manifestation. Jesus himself lived 30 years in Nazareth, 30 years, before beginning 3 years of ministry. The proportion is striking. 10 years of preparation for every year of visible action. And no one knew who he was during that time. He was the carpenter, Joseph's son, just another face in the crowd. Invisible, but not inactive. God was forming in him everything that would be necessary to carry the weight of what would come after. Often invisibility is the environment where God molds character without distractions. Think of it this way: when you're being observed, there's always a subtle temptation to perform, to adjust your response, your posture, your spirituality for the audience. But when no one's watching, you're confronted with the naked truth of what's really inside you. And it's there, in that place without an audience, that God works on the deepest layers. He removes what's superficial. He exposes hidden motivations. He tests whether you'll remain faithful even when no one applauds, even when there's no recognition, even when it seems like nothing's happening. Because the question God asks isn't, can you shine when everyone's watching? But rather, will you follow me when no one but me knows? There's a question that can reveal a lot about where you are right now. What do you do when no one's watching? I'm not talking about hidden sin or secret behavior. I'm talking about your real spiritual life, unfiltered, without performance. Do you still pray when there's no one to impress? Do you still serve when there's no one to thank you? Do you still seek God when it seems like He's silent? Because that's exactly where true character is formed, not under the spotlight, but in the shadows. And if you're in that place now, breathing deeply, trying not to give up, maybe God is trusting you more than you imagine. He's preparing you to carry something bigger than you can see now. But the preparation requires invisibility. Because if you received the attention before you were ready, it would destroy you instead of strengthening you. There's another biblical character who lived this dynamic brutally, Elijah. After confronting the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, after one of the most public and powerful moments in the Old Testament, God sent him to a place called the Brook Cherith, a hidden stream in the middle of nowhere. There, Elijah was fed by ravens, birds considered unclean, while drinking water from a creek that slowly dried up. There was no crowd. There were no visible miracles. There was nothing but silence, solitude, and blind obedience to what God had commanded. And then the brook dried up completely. Imagine the scene. The prophet who had just called down fire from heaven is now alone, without water, without an apparent plan, waiting for the next instruction. Elijah's invisibility at that brook wasn't punishment. It was protection. It was formation. It was God teaching total dependence before taking him to the next stage. Because God knew that an ego inflated by a public miracle could destroy Elijah faster than any enemy, so he hid him and trained him in secret. When you're invisible, there's a constant temptation to force visibility, to create your own platform, to shout louder, to do something, anything, to prove you still matter. But that rush can sabotage exactly what God is building in you, because God's timing rarely coincides with our anxiety. And if you skip steps, if you expose yourself before it's time, you might end up carrying a weight you weren't prepared for. Invisibility, in this sense, is protection. It's God saying, not yet. You're not ready yet. But keep going, keep trusting, keep obeying, keep being faithful, because what I'm preparing in you is bigger than what you're asking me for. And that requires patience, a patience that goes against everything the world teaches you. Now think about how this affects you day to day. You wake up in the morning and already feel the weight of invisibility. No one's going to ask how you are. No one's going to validate your effort. You're going to spend the whole day doing important things no one will recognize. And the temptation is to give up. Stop trying, stop praying, stop believing it's worth it. But what if, in this exact moment, God is watching with an intensity you can't perceive? What if your faithfulness in this invisible place is exactly what's qualifying you for what comes next? Because God isn't looking for people who shine when everyone's watching. He's looking for people who remain faithful when no one is. And that's rare. That's precious. That's what he uses to change generations. The loneliness of invisibility brings a specific pain. It's not just the absence of recognition. It's the feeling that your existence doesn't make a difference. You look back and see years of effort that seem to have generated nothing. You look around and see people being celebrated for things you've been doing much longer, with much more dedication, but without any visible return. And the question that won't leave your mind is, why? Why me? Why do I remain invisible while others are promoted, recognized, celebrated? And there's no easy answer to that. Because God doesn't owe you explanations, but He does owe you faithfulness. And His faithfulness doesn't depend on your visibility. It depends on His character. And God's character never changes. He doesn't forget. He doesn't abandon. He doesn't waste anything you're living through right now. Have you noticed how the most impactful stories in the Bible involve long periods of waiting before manifestation? Joseph waited years in an unjust prison before being promoted to governor of Egypt. Moses spent 40 years in the desert caring for sheep before leading an entire people out of slavery. David was anointed king as a teenager, but spent years fleeing, hiding in caves, invisible to those who should have recognized him. And Paul, the Apostle Paul, spent 3 years in Arabia after his conversion, in a transformation process so deep that he himself says he had to unlearn everything he knew. 3 years alone. 3 years invisible. 3 years being rebuilt by God before being launched into the ministry that would change the world. Invisibility wasn't an accident. It was by design. It was God saying, I need to prepare you before I expose you, because what comes next requires a foundation that can only be built in hiddenness. I know this sounds beautiful in theory, but day to day it really hurts, because you're not reading a finished biblical story. You're living your own story, not knowing how it will end. And in the middle of invisibility, it's hard to trust. It's hard to believe God is in control when everything around screams the opposite. But maybe the question isn't whether God is in control. Maybe the question is whether you'll keep trusting Him even when you can't see what He's doing. Because faith isn't seeing the whole path. Faith is taking the next step even in the dark. And God honors that. He always has. Not necessarily the way you expect, not necessarily in the timing you want, but He honors. Always. If you've realized your prayers have become formulas and you want to reclaim real intimacy with God, the divine code was designed to lead you out of that desert. The link is in the pinned comment. Choose your path and let's return to what is essential. I'll be honest with you. I've been through periods when I felt completely invisible. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers or that I overcame it gloriously. There were moments when I looked at what I was doing and thought, does this make a difference to anyone? Does anyone care? And the temptation was to stop, give up. Look for something that would give me immediate return, that would make me feel important, that would fill this void. But deep down, I knew God was testing me, not to punish me, but to prepare me. Because He knew, and I was still learning, that I needed to be faithful when no one was watching before I could be trustworthy when everyone was. And that changed how I see invisibility today. Not as a curse, but as a process. Painful, yes, but intentional. The truth is that invisibility reveals what you're really seeking. If you're serving God to be seen, invisibility will destroy you. But if you're serving God because He's worthy, regardless of who sees you, invisibility will strengthen you. And the difference between these two motivations doesn't appear when everything's going well. It only appears when no one's applauding. When you have to choose between giving up or continuing even without visible reward. And God observes that choice. Because it's in that choice that true character manifests. Not on the stage, not under the spotlight, but in the empty room, in the invisible work, in the silent faithfulness that no one but God witnesses. Now think about the emotional impact of this on your day. You wake up tired, not physically necessarily, but emotionally, because waking up every day knowing no one will validate your effort is draining. You make coffee, open the Bible, pray. But deep down, there's a voice whispering, what's the point? Nothing changes anyway. And then you face the day. You do what needs to be done. You serve, work, care, invest. But no one asks how you are. No one says thank you. No one acknowledges. And at the end of the day, when you lie down, there's a deep loneliness that doesn't always have a name. It's the loneliness of someone who feels forgotten. But what you might not realize is that God is closer to you in these moments than in any other, because He sees, He always saw. And what He's building in you now, in this invisibility, will sustain you when everything He prepared finally comes to light. There's an important difference between harmful isolation and hidden preparation. If your invisibility is accompanied by severe symptoms like deep depression, thoughts of giving up on everything, inability to function day to day, it's critical that you seek professional support and real community. Spiritual content doesn't replace comprehensive care. God uses therapists, doctors, friends, church, and recognizing you need help isn't lack of faith, it's wisdom, because God doesn't call you to carry everything alone. He calls you to trust Him, yes, but also to accept the support He places around you. But if what you're living through is a season of hidden preparation, where you still function, still serve, but feel invisible, then maybe God is molding you for something specific. And the question isn't, when will this end? But rather, what is God forming in me now? Because if you're only waiting for invisibility to pass, you'll waste the process. But if you learn to cooperate with what God is doing, even without fully understanding, you'll come out of this place transformed, not just promoted, transformed. And there's a huge difference between those two things. The Bible speaks of a man named John the Baptist. He lived his entire life in the desert. He ate wild honey and locusts. He wore clothes of camel hair. He had no home, no comfort, no social recognition, invisible to the eyes of the religious system of his time. But when he appeared, his voice shook an entire generation. He prepared the way for Jesus. And the strength of his voice didn't come from the platform he built. It came from the desert where God formed him. John the Baptist was powerful precisely because he was prepared in invisibility. He didn't need human validation because God had already validated him in hiddenness. And when the time came to speak, he spoke with an authority that came from years of silent formation. This isn't romanticization. This is biblical pattern. God forms in hiddenness before manifesting publicly. Here's something many people don't realize. Invisibility protects you from yourself. Because if you were promoted now, with the character you have now, with the unhealed wounds you still carry, with the mixed motivations that still move you, visibility would destroy you. You can't handle the weight, not yet. And God knows that. So He hides you, not because He forgot about you, but because He loves you too much to expose you before it's time. Invisibility is mercy disguised as abandonment. And when you finally understand that, not just intellectually but deeply, you'll stop fighting against it and start cooperating with it. Imagine for a second what God might be removing from you right now. Pride disguised as confidence. Need for approval disguised as love for others. Fear of rejection disguised as humility. Dependence on human recognition disguised as serving God. All these layers need to be stripped away before you can carry the weight of what God has for you. And this process doesn't happen on a stage. It happens in the empty room, in the brook that dries up, in the cave where you hide, in the unjust prison, in the silent desert. Because it's there, when you're alone with God and yourself, that truth appears. And truth hurts, but it also sets free. And God prefers to free you now in invisibility than to expose you later and watch you crumble under the weight of your own fragility. Have you thought about what it means to be faithful when no one's watching? I'm not talking about superficial morality. I'm talking about deep integrity, about doing the right thing even when no one will know, about serving without expecting return, about praying even when it seems God doesn't answer, about continuing to believe even when everything around contradicts your faith. That's the faithfulness God seeks, because it's easy to be faithful when there's an audience, when there's recognition, when there's visible reward. But being faithful in invisibility, that requires something that goes far beyond human effort. It requires total dependence on God. And that's exactly what He's forming in you. Dependence. Not as weakness, but as strength. Because when you finally understand that you don't need human validation, you become dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Because nothing can blackmail you. Nothing can manipulate you. You've already learned to live without applause. And whoever lives without applause can't be controlled by those who offer applause. There's a difficult tension here that needs to be named. I'm not saying you'll never be seen. I'm not saying invisibility is permanent. I'm not promising that tomorrow everything will change, because I don't know, and whoever promises that is lying to you. What I'm saying is that while you're invisible, God is working. And what He's building in you now is more valuable than any recognition you could receive before its time. But yes, it hurts, it's exhausting, it weighs, and validating this pain isn't lack of faith, it's humanity. Jesus wept. Jesus felt loneliness. Jesus went through moments of invisibility and misunderstanding. If He, being God, experienced that, why do you hold yourself to such a high standard for feeling the same? I'll share something I learned the hard way. For a long time, I thought God was silent because I had done something wrong, that invisibility was punishment, that if I prayed more, fasted more, tried harder, He would finally see me, but that only left me more exhausted. Because I was trying to earn something God had already given me, His attention. God always saw me. He always saw you. The question was never whether He sees us. The question is whether we'll trust Him even when we feel nothing, even when it seems He's silent, even when invisibility hurts so much you want to give up. Because it's in that place of blind trust, that God does His best work. And I had to learn that not by reading a book, but by living it, stumbling, crying, doubting, and little by little choosing to trust again. Invisibility also reveals who's really with you, because when you're on top, everyone shows up, everyone wants to be close, everyone has a word of encouragement. But when you're invisible, when no one gains anything by being at your side, that's when you discover who really loves you. And that's painful, because you realize that many people were only close to you for what you could offer, for status, for connection, for platform. But when all that disappears, most disappear too, and you're left alone. But maybe, just maybe, God is cleaning your circle before promoting you, because He knows you can't carry the wrong people into the next season. So He removes them, and it hurts, but it's necessary. Now let me ask you a sincere question. What would you do if you knew no one would ever recognize what you're doing? If you never had a stage, never had an audience, were never celebrated, would you continue? Because the answer to that question reveals everything. If the answer is no, then you're still serving the wrong audience. But if the answer is yes, because God is worthy regardless of who sees me, then you've already won the most important battle. Because you no longer need external validation. You've already found your validation in God. And that frees you from a prison most people never escape. The Bible describes Jesus entering Jerusalem on a Sunday, being received as king. Crowds shouting, "Hosanna," celebration, recognition. And then 5 days later, the same crowd shouting, "Crucify him." Visibility is volatile. Human recognition is unstable. Applause is temporary, but God's approval, that's eternal. And if you build your identity on human applause, you'll crumble when it stops. But if you build your identity on who God says you are, nothing can shake you. And invisibility is the place where that's tested. Because when no one's applauding, you discover in whom or in what your identity is really anchored. One of the hardest things about invisibility is the lack of milestones. When you're growing visibly, there are signs, promotions, recognitions, achievements. But in invisibility, there's none of that. You wake up every day and it seems you're in the same place, same routine, same challenges, same loneliness, and the temptation is to believe nothing's changing. But God doesn't only work in the visible, He works in the invisible. He changes things inside you that no one sees. He removes layers of pride you didn't even know you had. He heals old wounds you never processed. He strengthens spiritual muscles you'll need later. And none of this shows up on a resume. None of this generates likes, but all of it prepares you to carry the weight of what God has for you. Think of it this way: if a muscle doesn't face resistance, it doesn't grow. If a bone doesn't face pressure, it doesn't strengthen. If a tree doesn't face wind, it doesn't develop deep roots. Invisibility is spiritual resistance. It's pressure, it's wind, and it hurts, but it's what makes you truly grow. Because real growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in resistance, and God knows exactly how much pressure you can handle. He won't break you, but He will stretch you, because He's preparing you to carry something bigger than you ever imagined. You know what's interesting? When you finally come out of invisibility, and you will come out not because I promise, but because God is faithful, you won't want to go back to who you were before. Because the person who enters invisibility isn't the same one who exits. You enter weak, dependent on human validation, fragile. You exit strong, anchored in God with deep roots. And you realize that invisibility wasn't waste, it was investment. God was investing in you. He was depositing things inside you that no one can steal. Deep knowledge of Him, real intimacy, tested character, and that's worth more than any human recognition. But while you're still in the middle, while invisibility still hurts, what do you do? How do you survive this without giving up? First, you stop measuring your worth by visibility. Your worth doesn't depend on who sees you. Your worth depends on who created you. And God created you with purpose. He doesn't waste anything. So if you're invisible now, it's not because you have no value. It's because God is preparing you for something that requires more than you have now. And that should encourage you, not discourage you. Second, you remain faithful in the small things, because faithfulness in hiddenness qualifies you for responsibility in public. Jesus said this clearly: whoever is faithful in little will be faithful in much. And God observes your faithfulness when no one else is watching. There's a verse that says, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. And invisibility is one of the most powerful tools God uses to destroy pride. Because pride doesn't survive in anonymity. Pride needs an audience, it needs recognition, it needs validation. But when you're forced to live without all that, pride dies. And in its place, humility grows. Real humility, not false modesty, not performative humility, but that deep awareness that you are nothing without God. And when you finally understand that, truly understand, you become dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, because you can't be bought with compliments. You can't be manipulated with promises of visibility. You've already learned to live without, and whoever learned to live without can't be controlled with the promise of having. So, what do you do in the next few days? In the next few days, while invisibility still weighs, start small. Choose one thing, just one thing that you'll do faithfully, even if no one sees. It could be praying 5 minutes every morning before picking up your phone. It could be reading a chapter of the Bible without rushing. It could be serving someone completely anonymously. Do this for a week. Don't tell anyone. Don't post about it. Let it be just between you and God. And observe what happens inside you. Don't expect external miracles. Expect internal transformation, because that's where God is working now. After a week, add one more thing: a moment of gratitude before sleeping, a prayer for someone who hurt you, an act of kindness that no one will know came from you. Keep building, slowly, a life of hidden faithfulness, because that's the life God honors, not the one with more followers, not the one that generates more applause, but the one that's faithful when no one's watching. Repeat this, maintain it for a week, And when you feel it's becoming mechanical, go back to the why. Go back to God. Remember that you're not doing this to gain something. You're doing it because He's worthy. And that changes everything. There's something that needs to be said here, and it's difficult. Not all invisibility will end the way you expect. Some people serve God their entire lives and are never publicly recognized. And that's not injustice. It's calling, because God's kingdom isn't a pyramid where everyone needs to reach the top. It's a body where each part has a different function, and some parts are internal, invisible, but essential. And if God called you to be an invisible part, that's not less important. It's different. And if you spend your whole life trying to force visibility when God called you to invisibility, you'll live frustrated. But if you accept the place God gave you, even if no one sees, even if no one applauds, you'll experience a peace that goes beyond any human recognition. But that doesn't mean you give up on dreaming. It doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you surrender the outcome to God and focus on faithfulness, because faithfulness is your responsibility. Outcome is God's responsibility. And when you finally learn to separate those two things, you stop carrying a weight that was never yours. You stop demanding of yourself things you don't control, and you focus on what you can control, your faithfulness, your character, your intimacy with God, and that changes everything. So if you're feeling invisible right now, I need you to hear this. God sees you. He always saw. And what He's doing in your life now, even if you can't see it, is deeper and more powerful than anything that would happen if you were promoted before its time. He's removing what needs to be removed. He's healing what needs to be healed. He's strengthening what needs to be strengthened. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, there are days you want to give up, but don't give up. Because the faithfulness you're demonstrating now, when no one's watching, is exactly what God is looking for. And He doesn't waste anything. Nothing you're living through now is in vain. You're not alone. Even when it seems everyone forgot you, God didn't forget. Even when it seems your life doesn't make a difference, you're making a difference in ways you can't see. And one day, I don't know when, and I won't promise it'll be quick, you'll look back and understand. You'll see the connections. You'll see the purpose. You'll see what God was building while you were invisible, and you'll be grateful, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Because God loves you too much to leave you as you were. He's transforming you, and real transformation only happens in invisibility. So take a deep breath, dry your tears, and choose to trust one more time. Because God is in control. He always was. And what He started in you, He will complete. Not the way you imagine, not in the timing you want, but His way. And His way is always better, always. Tell me here in the comments. Have you ever felt invisible, and looking back, could you see the purpose? Or are you in that place now and need a reminder that God hasn't forgotten you? I want to hear your story. And if this video touched something deep in you, subscribe to the channel, because we're here walking together, seeking God, learning to trust even when we don't understand. And you're not alone in this journey.